You wake up at 6:47 a.m. This isn't your natural wake-up time, but your phone vibrated 3 times in succession with notifications that the algorithm calculated were urgent enough to interrupt your sleep. You get up, still drowsy, and without even realizing it, you're already scrolling through your Instagram feed. It's 7:02 a.m., and you've already seen 17 posts that the algorithm specifically chose to capture your attention for the next 20 minutes. You don't know it, but every second of your gaze is being measured. Every pause is being recorded. Every microfacial expression is being analyzed by your phone's front camera. At 7:23 a.m., you finally get up to have coffee. You open the delivery app, and magically, the first restaurant that appears is exactly what you were craving, even though you hadn't searched for anything. How did they know? At 8:15 a.m. on your way to work, you receive a podcast notification that seems perfect for your current mood. At 10:30 a.m., a news story appears in your feed that confirms exactly what you already thought about a political issue. In the afternoon, you get an ad for a product you'd been considering buying for weeks, but never searched for online. At the end of the day, you feel like you made dozens of free and autonomous choices. You chose what to eat, what to listen to, what to believe, what to buy. But here's the terrifying truth that few are willing to face. You didn't choose absolutely anything. Each of these decisions was carefully orchestrated by algorithmic systems that know you better than you know yourself. They knew you would wake up drowsy and vulnerable to first impressions. They knew exactly what type of content would exploit your emotional insecurities. They knew your resistance to consumption impulses would be low between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. They knew you would seek validation of your political beliefs after a stressful day at work. You believe you're living your life, but you're actually following a script written by machines that were programmed by people you'll never meet, working for companies whose true objectives you'll never fully understand. And the most frightening part is that this control doesn't happen through force, coercion, or obvious manipulation. It happens through the perfect illusion that you're always in command, always choosing, always exercising your individual autonomy. To understand how we reach this point of total algorithmic control, we need to go back in time and examine how power has always functioned in human history. For millennia, anyone who wanted to control populations had to use direct and visible methods. The pharaoh built monumental pyramids to demonstrate his divine power. The Roman emperor organized grand spectacles in the Colosseum to keep the masses distracted and submissive. Medieval kings erected imposing castles on hills so everyone would know who ruled the region. Control was physical, architectural, ritualistic. Even when societies became more complex, power mechanisms remained fundamentally visible. The Catholic Church controlled minds through Sunday sermons, confessionals, and elaborate ceremonies. Modern states developed educational systems to shape citizens, created mass media to influence opinions, and established bureaucracies to regulate behavior. You always knew where the power was. There was a pope in the Vatican, a president in the palace, a principal at school, an editor at the newspaper. Power had a face, an address, a clear hierarchy. But more importantly, you knew when you were being influenced. When the priest spoke from the pulpit, you understood you were receiving religious indoctrination. When you watched the evening news, you knew you were consuming a filtered version of events. When you saw an advertisement on TV, you immediately recognized that someone was trying to sell you something. There was a clear distinction between moments of external influence and moments of personal autonomy. This clarity allowed for conscious resistance. You could choose not to go to mass, change the channel, question what was being said. The digital revolution didn't just change the methods of control, it fundamentally redefined the nature of power itself. For the first time in human history, power became completely invisible, continuous, and apparently voluntary. Algorithms didn't replace the old methods of control. They made them obsolete by creating something much more efficient. A system that makes you want exactly what the system needs you to want. Consider how this works in practice. When you open any app on your phone, you're not simply accessing a neutral tool. You're entering a carefully designed environment where every pixel, every color, every transition has been optimized through thousands of psychological experiments to maximize your engagement. The developers aren't trying to create the best experience for you. They're trying to create the most addictive experience possible, one that will keep you in the app for the longest time possible. But the real power of algorithms isn't in their ability to capture your attention. It's in their ability to shape your fundamental desires. Through the analysis of billions of data points about your behavior, artificial intelligence systems can identify psychological patterns that you yourself don't know about. They know you become more impulsive when you're stressed. They know your self-esteem drops on Mondays. They know you're more susceptible to certain types of emotional appeals depending on your menstrual cycle, the weather, or even how many steps you took that day. With this information, algorithms don't just predict your behavior, they actively modify it. If the data indicates you're going through a period of low self-esteem, the algorithm might start showing you more content about personal transformation and beauty products. If it detects signs of social anxiety, it might direct content about relationships and dating apps. If it identifies tendencies toward compulsive behaviors, it might intensify exposure to special offers and limited time promotions. The most disturbing part is that this process happens below the threshold of consciousness. You never notice that you're being directed. The subjective feeling is always one of spontaneous discovery, happy coincidence, finding exactly what I was looking for. The algorithm meticulously preserves the illusion of autonomy while guiding you through a maze of predetermined choices. I need to pause for a moment to ask you directly, when was the last time you felt you were truly in control of your digital decisions? When did you last notice you were being influenced without realizing it? I know we often keep these concerns to ourselves, perhaps for fear of seeming paranoid in a world that celebrates technology as liberation. But your suspicions are valid and shared by more people than you imagine. Share in the comments. I feel I lose autonomy when I use my phone to. Your reflection can help others recognize similar patterns in their own lives and begin an honest conversation about how to reclaim our individual sovereignty. This transformation in the exercise of power has consequences that go far beyond digital consumerism, we're witnessing the emergence of a new ruling class that doesn't need armies, police, or traditional bureaucracies to exercise social control. The new masters of the world are software engineers working in corporate complexes in Silicon Valley, mathematicians creating predictive models in secret laboratories, and executives making decisions in boardrooms that will affect the behavior of billions of people without them ever knowing such decisions were made. These new power holders have discovered something no dictator in history managed to achieve: how to make people enthusiastically collaborate in their own subordination. There's no need to threaten, censure, or repress. You just need to create an environment where people naturally make the choices that benefit the system. It's like having a prison where the prisoners not only don't want to escape, but actively defend the virtues of remaining incarcerated. Algorithmic control is also redefining the nature of democracy and public discourse. Traditionally, democracy depended on the existence of a shared public space where different perspectives could compete for citizens' support. Newspapers, radio, and television, however imperfect, created a basic set of shared facts from which political debate could happen. Algorithms have completely fragmented this shared reality. Now, each person lives in a customized informational bubble where they only receive information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs. If you believe in conspiracy theories, the algorithm will feed that belief with more conspiracy theories. If you have political prejudices, you'll receive evidence that seems to confirm those prejudices. If you have anxieties about the future, you'll be bombarded with content that amplifies those anxieties. The result isn't just political polarization, it's the death of the very possibility of rational debate based on evidence. How can you have a productive discussion with someone who is literally living in a different reality from yours, algorithmically constructed to be as convincing as possible? How can you find collective solutions to social problems when you can't even agree on what the basic facts are? But perhaps the deepest dimension of this algorithmic revolution is how it's transforming our fundamental understanding of free will and human identity. For centuries, Western philosophy was based on the premise that human beings are rational agents capable of making autonomous choices based on conscious reflection. This belief grounded not only our political and legal systems, but our very notion of human dignity. Algorithms are demonstrating that this premise might be fundamentally false. If a computer system can predict and manipulate your choices with statistical accuracy superior to your own self-awareness, what does that say about your supposed autonomy? If your most intimate desires can be shaped by programming codes, what remains of your individual identity? We're discovering that the human mind might be much more mechanical and predictable than our self-esteem would like to admit. Algorithms reveal that much of what we consider personality, preferences, and conscious decisions are actually behavioral patterns as regular as planetary movements. Once you identify the patterns, you can predict and influence behavior with an efficiency that makes traditional political manipulation seem primitive. This discovery has staggering implications for concepts like personal responsibility, criminal justice, and individual merit. If your choices can be systematically influenced by algorithms, to what extent are you really responsible for your actions? If your personality can be shaped by systems operating outside your consciousness, what does it mean to have merit or guilt for your successes and failures? Some people respond to these revelations with denial or minimization. They argue that there have always been external influences on human behavior, that propaganda and manipulation aren't historical novelties, that we're simply dramatizing normal technological changes. This perspective completely misses the qualitative dimension of the transformation we are experiencing. The difference between traditional manipulation and algorithmic control isn't just one of scale, but of fundamental nature. Traditional propaganda was crude, obvious, and easily identifiable. You knew when you were being persuaded. Algorithms operate with a subtlety and personalization that makes resistance extremely difficult. How do you resist something you can't even perceive? How do you maintain autonomy in relation to systems that know your vulnerabilities better than you do? Moreover, the speed and ubiquity of algorithmic influence have no historical precedent. While traditional propaganda operated at specific moments and in limited contexts, algorithms are present in every moment of your digital life, influencing hundreds of micro decisions per day. The cumulative effect of this constant influence is a gradual transformation of personality that happens so slowly you can't notice you're changing. But is there hope for resistance and recovery of individual autonomy? The answer is complex and requires both personal changes and broader systemic transformations. At the individual level, the first step is developing what we can call algorithmic literacy, the ability to recognize when you're being influenced by automated systems. This means paying attention to your own behavioral patterns and questioning the origin of your impulses and desires. When you feel like buying something, stop and ask, where did this desire come from? When you find yourself with a strong opinion about a subject, reflect what information led to this opinion and how did it reach you? When you feel certain emotions after using digital devices, investigate what specific content provoked these reactions. The practice of metacognition, that is thinking about your own thoughts, becomes a fundamental skill of political resistance. The more aware you become of your own mental processes, the harder it becomes for external systems to manipulate those processes without you noticing. It's also crucial to establish regular moments of digital disconnection where you can experience your natural preferences and impulses without algorithmic interference. This doesn't mean simply getting off social media for a few hours, but creating substantial periods where you make decisions without consulting digital devices, where you form opinions through personal reflection or face-to-face conversations, where you experience boredom and quiet without constant stimulation. During these disconnection periods, many people discover that their desires and priorities change significantly, consumption impulses diminish, anxieties about issues that seemed urgent online reveal themselves to be artificial. Interests and curiosities that were suppressed by the bombardment of algorithmic content begin to resurface. It's as if you can finally hear your own voice after years of listening only to amplified echoes. At the collective level, we urgently need regulatory changes that limit technology companies' ability to collect personal data and manipulate behavior. This includes legislation that requires algorithmic transparency, gives users real control over what type of content they receive, and establishes clear ethical limits on what types of behavioral influence are acceptable. But perhaps more important than legal changes is a cultural transformation in how we understand technology and autonomy. We need to abandon the naive narrative that technology is neutral and that more digital connectivity automatically represents human progress. We need to develop a culture of healthy skepticism about systems that promise to give us exactly what we want, especially when we can't explain how they know what we want. We also need to revalue experiences and knowledge that cannot be digitized or algorithmized. This includes skills like deep contemplation, face-to-face conversation, manual work, silent walks, reading physical books, and other activities that require sustained attention and generate insights that cannot be easily captured in data. Resistance to algorithmic control shouldn't be understood as a Luddite rejection of technology, but as a defense of human dignity and complexity. Humans are more than the sum of their behavioral patterns. We have capacity for surprise, creativity, unexpected change, and choices that defy statistical predictions. Preserving this capacity requires constant vigilance against systems that try to reduce us to predictable datasets. Looking to the future, the question isn't whether we'll be able to completely avoid algorithmic influence. That's probably impossible in a digital society. The question is whether we'll be able to maintain an irreducible core of human autonomy that allows us to use technology without being completely used by it. This will require not just individual resistance, but the creation of social, educational, and cultural spaces that cultivate human capacities that algorithms cannot replicate or manipulate. The battle for human autonomy in the digital age will be defined in the coming decades. This isn't a fight against machines, but against social and economic systems that reduce human beings to exploitable resources. It's a struggle for the preservation of the unpredictability, complexity, and dignity that define our humanity. If these reflections have touched something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you're not alone. By subscribing to this channel, you'll connect with a growing